How's it going, Rip City? Welcome back to the Blazer Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Duvy, with co host Boozy. We are on episode 5. How are you doing, Boozy?
Doing well, doing well. Great week, great week. How about yourself?
I'm not doing too bad, just very busy with school, but we're getting by. We have some updates on how we're going to be doing the whole YouTube thing moving forward. We have plans to upload more content that is shorter to kind of make what we do more consumable. Um, so the new schedule going forward is a game recap being uploaded at 8 a.m. After every game the next day, and plus any sort of content, NBA rumors, Trailblazers rumors, Q&As, anything like that, being uploaded throughout the week at 10 a.m. On whatever day that ends up being posted. So game recaps after every game, more NBA and Blazers content, and also the podcast will still be happening, but we're going to transition it into more of an NBA focus podcast to where we're not just talking about Portland, because there's so many crazy things that happen in the NBA. It's all worth talking about. So we want to move the podcast into more of that territory, but our videos in between the podcasts are going to be shorter, more consumable, and still mostly Blazers focus and related. We're aiming for about 10 to 20 minutes. So we think that's a good plan going forward. You're going to get more content overall. It's just going to be spread throughout the week and uploaded in the mornings so that when you're drinking your coffee and going to work, you can listen to our beautiful voices talk. With that being said, we're excited to move in, whereas we're still figuring things out. And I think we have a good plan going forward. So let's move into what we want to talk about today. We're going to do things a little different today as well. We're going to talk about trends over the last week. So, Boozy, what were some trends from the Blazers that you saw this week?
I think definitely the biggest trend that we could all agree on is, big double digit deficits. We're either in the first half or second half. That was a common theme that we had throughout the week. And I think some other trends that kind of led up to, getting into those bigger deficits was allowing those open threes and letting teams get hot initially, and then trying to match that with being very stagnant on offense and kind of playing iso ball through Dame and CJ. What do you think about the Blazers double digit deficits and I believe all the games this past week?
Well, I think the other two trends that you talk about really correlate with us getting down into big holes because what we do is we play bad defense. We allow open threes, usually in the corners. And then we try to play hero ball on the other end to try and get ourselves back into it and answer their shots by taking more threes and more ISOs. And then that's how we get ourselves into those big holes. So, we were down big in every game this week, right?
Yep.
Um, Coming back and winning two of those. But, it's something that we saw going back into last week as well, starting with the Bulls game. And or not the Bulls game, sorry, the game after the Bulls. And so, you know, I think kind of being such a defensively terrible team kind of is what's getting us into those holes. So, how do you think we come out of those? How do you think we avoid getting into those positions?
I think a lot of it just comes with, Rocco and Derek Jones on the defensive end. Because you could see in that the Kings game was a pretty big one where you just saw them just go off, shooting lights out from three pretty much the entire first half. And it's just something where the team just needs to take a timeout, mentally get back into the game, and then come out and try to win it. I mean, you saw it in the second half. They started closing out faster, getting out to players, more team ball to get back in it. Obviously, Dame and CJ had fantastic nights to get us the win, putting historic nights, only one turnover, scoring 60 plus points combined, everything. But that's just not sustainable because obviously you saw in the next game against the Pacers, we got down big again and we just didn't have the energy. So just kind of finding the right balance between knowing who's hot on the opposite team and throwing Jones or Rocco on them, I think can be a huge difference maker in the long run. And, saving energy for more of our offensive guys to do what they do best. I think that's something that we need to do as a team is come together and stop it as a team rather than relying heavily on Rocco and Jones Jr. to stop them for us.
I think in that Pacers game at least, the third game in 4 nights, I think we can kind of expect not to win those.
It's tough, yeah.
But at the same time, I we shouldn't really lose like that in my opinion. But I mean, third game of 4 nights is never easy. Um, and so that game is a little more understandable. But there's been rumblings in the Blazer community that Rocco and Derek Jones just aren't enough on the defensive end still. Um, in terms of the rest of our team being so bad defensively, do you think the Blazers maybe make a move to try and acquire another defender? Could we see somebody like Rodney Hood be on the out soon?
I think we have enough with Trent also being off the bench and Rodney Hood starting to get his groove back, and also seeing CJ and Dame. You're starting to see a little more effort out of them defensively. I mean, you saw in the bubble, Dame when he wanted to guard somebody, he locked them up a pretty good bit. Jason Tatum is a prime example, got us back into the game against that Celtic team, and I think it just comes down to the schemes, which right now it's still a relatively newer bunch. And with injuries now, it's going to be harder. But I think just playing more of a team defense would help them getting deflections. Because usually when you see us coming back from these crazy deficits, it's we're getting deflections, we're getting steals, we're aggressive defensively. Obviously, sometimes that bites us. Against the State Warriors is a prime example of just getting into foul trouble. But I would rather us lose a game because we were overly aggressive in a smart way, obviously, not just, going out there trying to block everything, but doing it in a smart manner. If we lose a game and all of our guys fouled out, but they were, relatively bad calls, I'd rather take that loss than seeing Buddy Hield open for three in the corner, for 30 shots. So I think it just comes down to playing aggressive and playing within our own means, which hopefully will help at the end of the day.
Yeah, personally, I wouldn't mind seeing a guy like Larry Nance Jr. end up on the Blazers. Um, the Cavs are kind of in a weird spot right now, acquiring Jarrett Allen recently in that blockbuster Harden trade. Um, to
Or
where
even JaVale McGee on that team too. Either one would be a prime.
JaVale, yeah, he'd be a good pickup too. We could, I personally could see somebody like Rodney Hood in a second round pick move to Cleveland as kind of a salary dump for us, and getting a piece, either Larry Nance or JaVale, that we can use to kind of take that next step. Especially with Nurkic being out, which we'll touch on in a little bit. Um, but I got really concerned in that Hawks game seeing us give up layups. It was a lot of layups, especially in the transition as well. Um, we made Clint Capella look like Shaquille O'Neal,
Yeah.
and I think a part of that is, I mean, Ennis actually had a good defensive game, so I can't really blame him that much. It was just what I noticed a lot is that he would rotate up pretty well on the driving guy, but then there was no weak side help, and then it was an easy either lob or dump off to Capella or Collins down low. So I feel like that's where we need more help. Is just we need another rotational guy who's good at rotating on defense, and I feel like that's where somebody like Larry Nance, who's very active on defense, or JaVale McGee, who's a great shot blocker and has good positioning, I feel like that's where they can fit in. Because I don't really see that changing anytime soon. A lot of the times, the Melo stands will get me on this one, but a lot of times it was Carmelo on the backside of Capella or Collins as he goes up for an easy dunk or layup. So, and you can't have Rocco and Derek Jones on the court for 48 minutes a game. And so I feel like we need more help off the bench defensively. Because I feel like we still have scores in Gary Trent and fourth quarter Mello. And plus we always have either Dame or CJ out there. Um, so, I feel like that's where maybe one of those guys can slot in.
Yeah, because definitely our biggest issue is not offense. I
No,
mean, we've seen that for years. Our team can score lights out against anybody. It doesn't
right.
matter. And it's just one thing of just locking down, playing people to their strength. I mean, you have two phenomenal defenders in Gary Trent and Derek Jones on ball. You can easily get somebody out of their rhythm. With that gives the freedom to Derek Jones to play a little more aggressive, just because he knows if he gets into foul trouble, we have Derek Jones Jr.'s backup and Gary Trent, and then even having Rocco as the third option at that point, and like you're saying with that weak side help, having Rocco that's that perfect position for him, and it could just come down to these people not playing too much with each other. Obviously, Cantor's coming from the bench. Melo doesn't usually play with the starters until the end game, kind of a thing. But it's defense is definitely still the biggest issue, and we've been preaching it for years. And it seems like it might be a coaching issue at this point. We have the pieces to make this team one of the better defensive teams in the league, and it just might be the play style. Obviously, we have a very fast pace as well, which allows both teams to shoot a lot. And either we need to slow it down and take possession by possession. And there's a lot of solutions. Which one's the best? We still don't know. So I think with having as many defenders as we have, we're at a good spot. It's just not using them the correct way.
Well, speaking to where you had mentioned coaching issues, regardless of record, how are you feeling about the Fire Stotts, murmurs that are still going on? Because I even tweeted last game at Fanatics Blazer. You can follow us on Twitter there. I even mentioned that it was time. It's time to fire Stotts when we got down by 16 because we were allowing open layups that whole stretch where we fell down. How are you feeling about that crowd? Because even though we're winning games, I'm sympathizing more and more with that, and I'm kind of feeling the same way because we can't, it's unacceptable with a team we have to get down in those holes.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough thing because obviously we're not behind the scenes there. We don't know what's happening at these practices and everything. But it's gotten to the point where you're seeing the same thing. Like it seems like we're going crazy nowadays, just expecting a different result, but it's the same thing every single time. So I don't know if it's just that's what we've decided that we can just outscore everybody, and we'll take chances that we'll we'll take the odds on the games that we'll outscore them rather than defending them. Um, it could be a matter of things. It's tough to do it mid-season just with the limited amount of options out there. With coaches usually getting fired at the end of a season, or if they do mid-season, it's usually just an interim assistant coach for the most part. So I don't know if right now is the right time, but if there's a guy out there in the coaching availability, there could be a way to do it. But I think it's too soon. And if the end of the season kind of goes the same way it's been the last couple of years, I think it might be time to move on and go into a very win now with Dame because he's entering the later part of his prime. A couple more years, maybe even longer with how LeBron's been playing. But it's definitely new, and hopefully Portland can make the right decisions coming through. O'Shea's made some good decisions, but he's also made some very poor ones. So I guess that's what we have as being Portland fans. You never know what to expect. Every day is a new day for us.
Yeah, my thoughts on that are it seems like we don't play for Terry, like we've kind of almost given up on Terry as a team, but then when Dame gets mad and Dame's the one to fire up our team, that's when we turn it on and we come back. It seems like when we get down, we're playing for Terry Stotts and we're playing how Stotts wants to play. And then when Dame gets mad, we start playing for Dame and then we start playing good. So in that sense, as a fan, it almost seems like we're giving up on Stotts, but we're still riding behind Dame. And if we didn't have Dame, I mean, first of all, we'd be trashed because we didn't have Dame. But if we didn't have Dame's leadership, I should say, then we'd suck. Our record would be a lot
Yeah,
worse off. So I feel like we're playing for Dame, not for Terry. And I look at guys like Kenny Atkinson, Ime Udoka, and Becky Hammond, and I say, well, how much worse could they do? Even Wes Unseld Jr. I look at those coaches and be like, hey, you have a pretty good roster here. What can you do with it? I think Kenny Atkinson's a players coach, and I feel like he's somebody that the players would rally behind. He's my personal top candidate for the job. So I'd love to see, what they can do even if it is at the expense of Terry. Let's move into some sad news. Yusuf Nurkic out 8 weeks with a broken wrist, and CJ McCollum out day to day. He's out for tomorrow's game against the Spurs with a sprained left foot. Are we cursed as a franchise, Boozy?
yeah. It was a tough week for injuries, and that's sake. Having we were hoping the best from Nurkic. Not having to get surgery because that's definitely the longer timetable for return, and his return might not even see him as the same player again. This is another like situation with down in Utah with Bogdanovich. He had surgery last year on his wrist, and his shot still isn't back, and it's been several months of continual practice and everything. So it's something scary for Portland, and we just have had the history, obviously, with being a pretty cursed team, like you've been saying, and I believe we are with our bigs. I mean, Greg Oden, everybody, and it's tough to see, especially after last week. Nurkic finally was getting back into that groove, and then to just see the freak accident that happened, just it was near inches of him missing his kneecap too, and then it just happened to go that way. So it's at least CJ's. It doesn't seem to be too serious, from the get go. It's just a minor sprain that hopefully he'll return within at least a week or two maximum, which is good to see. But yeah, it's tough news to see a player like Nurk after everything he's dealt with to go back into rehab, and after the start of the season he's had and becoming the player we know he is, and the timing just sucks really.
Yeah, and I mean it's been one game, but moving forward, I think Enos is better off in the starting lineup. Um, he played defense. I mean, when this season could we say he did that? you know,
Yeah,
I mean he had 5 blocks against Atlanta. Um, and he's really good in the starting lineup. He plays really well next to Damon CJ. I don't think if he plays like this going forward, there is no reason to take him out of that starting five. So when Nurkic comes back, I think for his health and safety, and for the sake of our starting five's cohesiveness, I could see Nurk playing on the bench. I think he'd be a defensive upgrade on the bench as well, which we've talked about that we need. And I think at this point we just need to protect the big man. I mean, you know, a broken wrist. can either be 4 weeks or 8 weeks, depending on surgery. But with this team, what can go wrong does go wrong, and
Yeah.
he needed surgery. So that's a big bummer, and I don't know what we've done as a franchise to deserve this, but you know, I, we're pretty cursed by the basketball gods. I mean, this goes all the way back to Bill Walton, and then Sam Bowie, ugh, and then Greg Oden and Brandon Roy, and players in between all of them as well. So, I mean, we even had one point where Nate McMillan got hurt. Do you remember that? Like
In the
when,
practice, because we had so many players hurt. He had to practice and got hurt
yeah,
in that one practice.
yeah, he got hurt in I mean, we've had points where our coaches get hurt, like pretty serious stuff too. So I feel like at that point, you just got to be a cursed franchise for some reason. And so, I feel like for Nurk's health and everything, he needs to come off the bench at least for the rest of the season. He needs to just play somewhat of a full season. I mean, I feel like we'll be fine without him, but we'll always be better off with him because I feel like he's that one guy that the players get behind, other than Dame, and he's a spark plug. When he's playing good, the team plays good, and we need him, and we need him healthy. So we
Because I
need to
think
protect him at all costs.
I like how you're talking about starting Cantor because you know what you're going to get out of Cantor every night.
Right?
He's just going to be the instant double double no matter what.
Yeah.
He's going to get offensive rebounds. You know exactly what he's going to do. I think that's perfect for a starter
Mm-hmm.
caliber player to know exactly what you're going to get. I mean, you with all of our starters, you pretty much know outside of Nurkic, you know what you were going to get. With Jones Jr. and Covington, you were going to get defense, Damon CJ scoring, and then Nurkic was that wild card in
Right.
every game. You never knew if he would go off for 20, or he'd have a dud, you
Right.
know? So I think that's a new thing where, like, with Cantor, he fits around Damon CJ more. Obviously, he's not the type of passer, but he has his moments. And I think defensively, it helps that now he's playing with, Jones Jr. and Covington rather than Mello and Hood. That's definitely helping him being able to focus on what he needs to do rather than what everyone else does. And I think that ultimately, with you've seen a lot of issues and brought them up with our bench unit. Not really having a lot of movement and kind of just iso ball mostly. And I think just with having Nurkic on the bench for not even just this season, like maybe for the future too, to preserve him as well. With He'll be that guy to kind of glue everyone together on that bench and make them play around him and being able to find open shots easier. And then if we do need him at the end of a game, because he's playing better, then you finish him out rather than subbing him out. Or if he's having one of his bad games, you have Cantor finish it out. So I think definitely that's a great idea for the future to have Nurk come in off the bench. And I think that's what he specializes in, just being that player who gets everyone involved, as well as Cantor's more of a complement to a star.
Yeah, I think Nurk
With
has really good vision and playmaking for a big man. And I
yeah,
think that will definitely help the second unit because we've seen a lot more isolations out of that group. And so, throwing him in there will generate ball movement, and he's an active player. But Cantor is way more active than he is. Um, he's way more active with the first unit than he is with the second. I mean, I've never seen him really play that hard, you know?
yeah,
And the 5 blocks shows it because that's not what he does. And he was another double double machine. And it's interesting. I wonder if Derek Jones had a double double too. I wonder if that's a byproduct of playing with Cantor, because I think that was his first double double of the season, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so I feel like Cantor complements what Derek Jones and Covington does really well, whereas in the second unit, Cantor kind of does the same things that some of the other guys do. And so I feel like he just gels better with that first group, and I really like to see him run with them more often. And Obviously with Nurk being out, we're going to. And I feel like when he comes back, if he still is playing really well, we should continue to see that.
I mean, this is also a player who got a max contract, 5, 6 years ago with when he played phenomenally with OKC.
Summer of
I
16.
mean, yeah, he was that guy on their team who was putting up 18 and 10 a night with, the players like KD and Westbrook
Yeah.
and, Harden towards, in his beginning years. They all play together. And I mean, he held his own in that starting lineup. He got his own. He complemented them well, and I think that's something he could do with our team. That's He's just consistent. You'll never see Cantor have a bad game. I mean, even in his last stint with Portland, he never really had a bad game.
No.
Obviously some days, he'd get bodied by other bigs, but like, he's aggressive type, and that's just something I think we need in our starting lineup is just somebody who would just go for every rebound. Because I think that's also what Melo does in the bench unit. It's I think they fight too much over rebounds and stuff like that. And I think just allowing Cantor to kind of have his freedom because he doesn't need post ups like most players do, and because he just gets them off offensive rebounds. And with Dame and CJ not shooting the ball well some nights, this is the perfect guy to finish those. And I think Cantor for the rest of the season will be a huge help, and it could even be an upgrade. Weird as that may sound in our starting lineup, but I think it could build the cohesiveness between the starting lineup with having just a different element that teams are not going to expect. Because I mean, every eye is on Dame and CJ, but now if you have the bigs having to focus on Dame and CJ off a screen and then rushing back to get box out Cantor, that's a lot for a lot of these big guys around the league. Outside of AD and a handful of them, but Cantor definitely brings a different side to our starting five that we've been missing for a little bit the start of the season.
Yeah, I agree. And, that's not to Nurkic's fault. That's just playing the Cantor's strength of what he brings to the
Yeah,
starting five. That's, we're not saying any of this because we don't think Nurk is an amazing big man. It's just it's just because of the shape of the team and how the team's built. So as much as we love Nurk, you have to do what's good for the team going forward. It's a business, and if Cantor's better in the starting five and Nurk's better off the bench, no one can really complain. Let's move ahead into this week's games. Starting off Monday night against San Antonio, Wednesday versus Memphis, Friday also versus Memphis, and Sunday versus the New York Knicks, all at home. How are we looking for this week, Boozy? What are your thoughts?
man, it's a tough week when you have to play, one of our, I guess, rivals, you could say, from the bubble and the Grizzlies twice. I mean, they just got Jaw back, so their team's getting back to strength. Obviously, still missing JJJ. Um, but this is a pretty tough week for us. Going against the Spurs. They're very solid team. Never really have a bad game. They're always in every game for the most part. Then you go against the Grizzlies. Obviously, we've seen them in the bubble, and then the New York Knicks. They've been playing hot this season, as you know,
Playing,
and
yeah, way over expectation.
that's just something that it'll be a challenge for us to keep up. Obviously, they play a fast pace, with Randall and their guards, but it's a doable week. It's still tough, but I think with Grizzlies not having Valanciunas, that's usually a player who hurts us. Potentially out for the matchups with Portland could benefit us, but you never know. We always allow some secondary player to always go off, so it really depends how the matchup plays out.
Yeah, I look at this week and I see 2-2. Um, I think we can beat the Spurs. I think we'll go 1-1 against the Grizzlies, and I think we, the next game is kind of a toss up, depending on just who shows up. Um, we have a game every other day this week. Um, and so we're gonna be tired come that Knicks game, and the Knicks have been playing, for the Knicks really well this year. I mean, Julius Randle looks like a dark horse MVP candidate, as crazy as that sounds. So, it's a 3-1 or 2-2 week, honestly. Um, the Knicks and the Grizzlies are both young and active teams. Mitchell Robinson's going to give us fits. Julius Randle's going to give us fits. Um, and yeah, I'm not sure. We're 8-5 going into this week. It's at least it's all at home. We're not doing any traveling, so that's a big plus for Portland. Dame versus Jaw is gonna be really interesting. It'll be
Yeah,
it'll be fun to see Aldridge back, that old man, and we're not gonna have CJ against the Spurs, so we need players to step up. We need, honestly, kind of based on what we saw in the second half of the Hawks game, we could see Anthony Simon starting alongside Dame. That's what Terry did coming out of half against Atlanta, to kind of
yeah, and then having
preserve
a
Gary off the
start
bench.
the opposite. Yeah, it's definitely a weird situation. I mean, you even spoke about it. Being 8-5 with all the struggles we've had early on is better than we should be,
Yeah,
and everything else. And it's a lot of players are gonna have to step up without, CJ's. He's another, MVP candidate. As crazy as that sounds, as well, with Randall up there too, and it's gonna be, more shots for Trent, more shots for Hood, Simons, and I think Trent's ready for the challenge. I think this is what he wants to show what he can do and, get more minutes. Obviously, in the bubble, he didn't get that was kind of where he got his start. And now this is his time to kind of get the starter quality minutes and be able to show what he can do.
yeah. Good news for Portland, but unfortunate news in general. It's Jonas Valanciunas could be out against Portland. I believe he has entered COVID protocols. So that's a help for Portland. Never want to see guys either get COVID or have to sit out because they could possibly have it, but that could benefit Portland. I'm looking here. It currently says John Morant's out. I mean, I know he's back, but I wonder if they have COVID issues going on in Memphis right now. That'd be interesting to see the reports in the next few days. I would hate for games to get canceled or postponed. I mean, but I guess we'll kind of see what happens. We could be playing two less games than normal this week. Not sure what's happening in Memphis, but we know we have 4 games scheduled total, so I guess we'll find out what happens. I think that is where we will leave it off. Episode 5 of the Blizzard Fanatics podcast is done. We thank you guys for watching. You can follow us on Twitter at FanaticsBlazer. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We greatly appreciate it. We thank you guys for watching, and we will see you Monday with a new schedule coming out. Super excited for that. Thank you guys for watching.
Adios.